What do you think would happen if a buffalo encountered a wounded crocodile? If you're interested, then let's begin. The wind howled across the Wyoming prairie, a relentless force that bent the brittle grass and carried the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. The horizon stretched endlessly, a canvas of amber and gold under a sky bruised with the threat of a late summer storm. In the heart of this desolate expanse, where the Bighorn Basin met the jagged edge of a shallow canyon, Dr. Lena Blackfeather trudged forward, her boots crunching against the parched ground. A Native American wildlife biologist with the Shoshone tribe, Lena had spent 2 decades studying the buffalo herds that roamed these lands, their massive forms a living testament to the resilience of the American West. Her dark braids swung against her back as she scanned the landscape, her sharp eyes catching a flicker of movement in the distance. Lena adjusted the binoculars hanging around her neck, her weathered hands steady despite the chill creeping through her jacket. She was 42, with a lean frame hardened by years of fieldwork and a quiet intensity that came from a deep connection to the land. Her grandfather's stories of the buffalo, sacred giants that carried the spirit of the plains, had guided her career, from her PhD in wildlife ecology to her current role monitoring the reintroduced herds of the Wind River Reservation. Today, she was tracking a report from a local rancher about a lone buffalo acting strangely near the canyon's edge. "Not right," the rancher had muttered over the phone, his voice tight. "It's just standing there, like it's waiting for something." As Lena crested a low rise, the sight stopped her cold. There, silhouetted against the gathering storm clouds, stood a massive buffalo bull. He was a colossus, easily 2,000 pounds, his broad shoulders rising 6 feet at the hump, his chestnut-brown coat matted with dust and streaked with dark, glistening patches that could only be blood. His curved horns gleamed dully in the fading sunlight, and his breath came in heavy, labored huffs, each one sending a faint cloud into the air. His hooves were planted firmly in the dirt, his massive head lowered as if guarding something at his feet. Lena's heart quickened. This was no ordinary buffalo. His presence radiated a raw, unshakable power, yet his dark eyes held a spark of something else: intelligence, determination, perhaps even desperation. She crouched low, her pulse racing as she studied the scene. The buffalo's flank was torn, a jagged wound oozing blood that stained the grass beneath him. His left foreleg trembled slightly, as if bearing weight pained him, yet he did not move. Most buffalo would have bolted at the sight of a human, their instincts honed by centuries of survival. But this one stood his ground, his gaze flicking toward Lena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He wasn't fleeing. He wasn't charging. He was waiting. Lena's radio crackled, and a voice broke the silence. "Dr. Blackfeather, you see it yet?" It was Tom Redhawk, a young wildlife volunteer from the reservation who'd joined her for the day. His pickup was parked a quarter-mile back, where the terrain became too rough for wheels. "Rancher said it's been there since dawn. Ain't moved an inch." "I see him," Lena murmured, her voice low as she raised the binoculars. The buffalo's eyes locked onto hers through the lenses, and for a moment, she felt a jolt of connection, as if he were assessing her as much as she was assessing him. "He's hurt. Badly. But he's not running. Something's keeping him here." Tom's boots crunched as he caught up, his breath visible in the cooling air. He was in his early 20s, wiry and eager, with a knack for tracking but less experience with the unpredictability of wild animals. "What's he doing? Just standing there like that? Looks like he's been in a fight." Lena nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. A predator, maybe, coyotes or a rogue wolf, but the wounds didn't look like claw marks. Poachers? The thought made her stomach twist. Buffalo were protected here, but illegal hunting still happened, especially for trophy horns. She scanned the ground around the buffalo, noting the churned earth, the faint tracks leading toward the canyon's edge. Then she froze. A low, guttural sound reached her ears, not the buffalo's deep bellow, but something else. A hiss, sharp and pained, coming from the ground near the bull's hooves. "Tom, stay back," Lena whispered, her hand raised. She took a cautious step forward, her eyes never leaving the buffalo. He snorted, his massive head swinging slightly, but he didn't charge. Instead, he shifted his weight, revealing a glimpse of something beneath him, a flash of scaly hide, a thrashing tail. Lena's breath caught. A crocodile? Out here. The nearest river was miles away, and crocodiles weren't native to Wyoming. But as she squinted, she realized it wasn't a true crocodile. It was an alligator, its armored body half hidden in a shallow depression in the earth. Its jaws were clamped shut, its eyes wild with panic, and around it, circling just beyond the buffalo's reach, were 3 lean, snarling jackals. Lena's mind reeled. Jackals weren't native either, likely escaped from some illegal exotic pet trade or a poorly managed wildlife park. The alligator, too, must have been abandoned or released, far from its natural habitat. But the buffalo, this magnificent, wounded beast, was standing over the alligator, its massive frame a shield against the predators circling for an easy kill. The jackals yipped and darted, testing the buffalo's resolve, but he held firm, his hooves stomping the ground with a force that echoed like thunder. "Dr. Blackfeather, what the hell is going on?" Tom's voice was a mix of awe and disbelief. That buffalo's protecting an alligator? From jackals? Lena's throat tightened. She'd seen buffalo defend their calves, their herd, but this? This was something else entirely. The buffalo's eyes met hers again, and in them, she saw not just pain but purpose. He was choosing to stand, to protect a creature that had no place in his world, despite his own injuries. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. The buffalo carries the heart of the land. It knows what must be done, even when we do not. She lowered the binoculars, her hands trembling slightly. "He's not just protecting it," she said softly. "He's risking his life for it. We need to help him." Tom hesitated, his eyes darting to the jackals. "Those things look hungry. And that buffalo's not gonna let us near without a fight." Lena shook her head, her resolve hardening. "He's not fighting us. He's asking for help." She took another step, her movements slow and deliberate, her voice low and soothing. "Easy, big fella. We're here to help." The buffalo's ears flicked, his breath a heavy rasp, but he didn't move. The alligator hissed again, weaker this time, its body trembling in the dirt. The jackals grew bolder, their yips sharper, their eyes glinting with hunger. Lena's heart pounded as she edged closer, the wind whipping her braid against her cheek. The buffalo's wounds were worse up close, deep gashes across his flank, blood pooling in the dust. Yet he stood like a sentinel, his massive head lowered, his horns a silent warning to the jackals. The air was thick with the scent of blood and sage, and the distant rumble of thunder underscored the urgency of the moment. Lena's eyes darted to the ground, searching for clues. The depression where the alligator lay was unnatural, almost like a shallow pit. Had it been trapped? Abandoned? And why was the buffalo here, alone, far from his herd? "Tom, call for backup," Lena said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "We need a vet team, maybe the sheriff. And tranquilizers, just in case." Tom nodded, fumbling for his radio. "What are you gonna do?" Lena's gaze locked onto the buffaloes. "I'm going to figure out what he's trying to tell us." She took another step, her hand outstretched, her breath catching as the buffalo snorted again, his eyes never leaving hers. Beneath him, the alligator's tail twitched, and a faint, almost inaudible sound reached her ears, a low, desperate whine, not from the alligator, but from something else, hidden in the shadows of the pit. Lena froze, her heart lurching. There was something else down there. Something the buffalo was guarding with his life. "Stay with us, this is just the beginning." The Wyoming prairie seemed to hold its breath as the storm clouds thickened, casting a gray pall over the canyon's edge. The wind carried a sharp bite now, tugging at Lena Blackfeather's jacket as she crouched just beyond the reach of the wounded buffalo bull. His massive form loomed like a monument, his blood-streaked coat matted with dust, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that felt almost human. The alligator beneath him hissed faintly, its scaly body trembling in the shallow pit, while the 3 jackals circled at a wary distance, their yips cutting through the air like knives. Lena's pulse hammered in her ears, her mind racing to make sense of the scene. The buffalo's defiance, his refusal to flee despite his injuries, was extraordinary, but it was the faint whine she'd heard, barely audible over the wind, that sent a chill down her spine. Something else was in that pit, something the buffalo was protecting alongside the alligator. "Tom, how long till backup gets here?" Lena called, her voice low to avoid startling the bull. She kept her eyes on him, noting the way his ears flicked, the way his massive head tilted slightly as if assessing her intent. His wounds were severe, deep gashes along his flank, blood pooling in the dirt, but his stance was unwavering, his hooves planted like roots in the earth. "Sheriff's 20 minutes out," Tom replied, his radio crackling as he stepped closer, his boots crunching on the dry grass. "Vet team's further, maybe 40. They're bringing tranks and a mobile unit." He paused, his voice dropping. "Dr. Blackfeather, what's that sound? You hear it?" Lena nodded, her gaze darting to the pit. The whine came again, weaker, almost lost in the wind's howl. It wasn't the alligator, the sound was too soft, too plaintive. She edged closer, her movements deliberate, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. "Easy, big guy," she murmured, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Let me see what you're guarding." The buffalo snorted, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the ground. His head lowered, his curved horns glinting in the dim light, but he didn't charge. Instead, he shifted slightly, one hoof scraping the dirt, revealing more of the pit. Lena's breath caught. Nestled against the alligator's side, half hidden in the shadows, was a small, shivering shape, a jackal pup, its fur matted with blood and dirt, its tiny body curled tightly as if seeking warmth from the unlikely guardian above it. The alligator, despite its own distress, hadn't snapped at the pup. It lay still, its eyes half closed, as if too weak to react. Lena's mind reeled. A buffalo protecting an alligator and a jackal pup? It defied every instinct she'd studied in her years as a wildlife biologist. Buffalo were herd animals, fiercely protective of their own but indifferent to other species. Yet this bull, wounded and alone, was standing sentinel over two creatures that had no place in his world. The jackals circling the pit, likely the pup's kin, were no longer just predators, they were a threat to something the buffalo had chosen to defend. "Tom, you seeing this?" Lena whispered, her voice thick with awe. She pointed to the pup, its faint whimpers tugging at her heart. "He's protecting them both. The alligator and the pup." Tom's eyes widened, his hand tightening on the radio. "That's insane. Why would a buffalo do that? And where'd these animals come from?" Lena shook her head, her mind racing through possibilities. The alligator and jackals were exotics, likely escapees from an illegal menagerie or a failed smuggling operation. The Bighorn Basin wasn't far from smuggling routes used to traffic rare animals, and abandoned or escaped creatures weren't unheard of. But the buffalo's behavior was unprecedented. She'd read studies on animal altruism, dolphins saving swimmers, elephants mourning their dead, but a buffalo risking its life for a reptile and a predator's offspring? That was a mystery that demanded answers. She took another cautious step, her eyes scanning the pit for clues. The depression was unnatural, its edges too sharp, as if dug by human hands. Tire tracks, faint and partially eroded by the wind, led away toward the canyon's edge. Lena's stomach twisted. This wasn't a natural encounter. Someone had been here, someone who'd left these animals to die. The buffalo's wounds suggested a struggle, perhaps with the jackals or something worse. Had he stumbled upon this scene and chosen to intervene? "Dr. Blackfeather, we gotta do something," Tom said, his voice urgent. "Those jackals aren't gonna wait much longer, and that buffalo looks like he's barely standing." Lena nodded, her resolve hardening. She pulled her satchel forward, retrieving a small flashlight and a pair of gloves. "We need to get closer, assess the alligator and the pup. But we can't spook him." She gestured to the buffalo, whose breathing was growing more labored, his massive frame swaying slightly. "He's trusting us, Tom. We don't break that trust." Tom hesitated, his eyes darting to the jackals. "What about them? They're not gonna let us near without a fight." Lena's gaze flicked to the circling predators, their lean forms slinking through the grass. We'll deal with them if we have to. For now, focus on the buffalo. He's the key. She moved forward, her steps slow and deliberate, her voice a soft hum, a Shoshone lullaby her grandfather had taught her, one he'd sung to calm horses. The buffalo's ears twitched, his dark eyes tracking her every move. He snorted again, but it was softer this time, almost a sigh. Lena's heart pounded as she reached the edge of the pit, the flashlight beam cutting through the gathering dusk. The alligator was in rough shape, its hide scored with shallow cuts, likely from the jackal's teeth. The pup, barely larger than a housecat, whimpered again, its tiny body pressed against the alligator's flank. The buffalo's massive head lowered, his breath warm and heavy, as if checking on the creatures below. Lena's throat tightened. "You're a brave one, aren't you?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Standing here, bleeding out, just to keep them safe." The buffalo's eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. There was no fear in his gaze, only a quiet resolve, a depth that spoke of something ancient and unshakable. Lena's grandfather had called the buffalo the heart of the plains, a creature that carried the weight of the land's history. She felt that weight now, in the bull's unwavering stance, in the way he seemed to plead for her help without a sound. The radio crackled again, and a new voice broke through. "Dr. Blackfeather, this is Sheriff Callie Wade. We're 10 minutes out. What's the situation?" Lena pressed the radio to her lips, her eyes never leaving the buffalo. "Sheriff, we've got a wounded buffalo protecting an alligator and a jackal pup in a pit. 3 adult jackals circling, looking for a chance to strike. We need a vet team ASAP and something to scare off the jackals." A pause, then Callie's voice, laced with disbelief. "Did you say an alligator? And a buffalo's protecting it?" "You heard me right," Lena said. "This bull's not moving, and he's hurt bad. We need to move fast." "Copy that. We're bringing rifles and flares. Hang tight." Lena clipped the radio to her belt, her mind racing. The buffalo's condition was deteriorating, his breathing was shallower, his wounded leg trembling more visibly. The jackals were growing bolder, their yips sharper, their movements tighter as they closed in. Lena's flashlight beam caught a glint of something in the pit, half buried in the dirt near the alligator's tail. She squinted, her heart skipping a beat. It was a piece of torn fabric, bright orange, like a hunter's vest. Human-made. A clue to who had been here, and why. "Tom, you see that?" she said, pointing. "In the pit. Looks like clothing." Tom leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Yeah. Looks ripped, like someone was in a hurry." "You think, poachers? Smugglers?" "Maybe," Lena said, her voice grim. "But why leave these animals? And why's the buffalo involved?" She turned back to the bull, her voice softening. "What happened here, big guy? What did you see?" The buffalo let out a low, rumbling bellow, his head dipping toward the pit as if urging her to look closer. The jackal pup whimpered again, and the alligator's tail twitched, a weak sign of life. Lena's heart ached at the sight, the buffalo's pain, the pup's vulnerability, the alligator's struggle. Whatever had brought these creatures together, it was no accident. The buffalo's actions were purposeful, selfless, a defiance of nature's rules that demanded an explanation. The distant hum of engines signaled the sheriff's approach, but Lena knew time was running out. The buffalo's strength was fading, the jackals were closing in, and the storm was rolling closer, its thunder a warning of chaos to come. She needed to act, to understand what the buffalo was protecting and why. The orange fabric, the unnatural pit, the buffalo's wounds, they were pieces of a puzzle, and the answer lay in the shadows beneath the bull's hooves. The Wyoming prairie pulsed with tension as the storm closed in, its thunder rolling like a drumbeat across the Bighorn Basin. Dark clouds churned overhead, casting jagged shadows over the shallow pit where the wounded buffalo bull stood, his massive frame a bulwark against the circling jackals. Lena Blackfeather's heart pounded as she crouched near the pit's edge, her flashlight beam cutting through the gathering dusk to illuminate the surreal scene. An alligator, its scaly hide scored with cuts, lay trembling in the dirt, a tiny jackal pup curled against its side, whimpering softly. The buffalo's chestnut-brown coat was streaked with blood, his gashed flank glistening in the dim light. Yet he held his ground, his deep eyes locked on Lena with a trust that felt both humbling and urgent. The faint whine of the pup, the alligator's labored breathing, and the buffalo's low, resonant snorts wove a fragile thread of connection in the chaos. The jackals grew bolder, their yips sharp and frenzied as they darted closer, testing the buffalo's resolve. Lena's breath hitched as one lunged, its teeth bared, only to retreat when the bull stomped a massive hoof, sending a tremor through the ground. "Hold on, big guy," she murmured, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. The orange fabric she'd spotted in the pit, torn, bright, and out of place, nagged at her mind. It was a clue, a human mark in this wild tableau, but there was no time to investigate. The buffalo's strength was waning, his wounded leg trembling, his breathing shallow and ragged. The pup and alligator were fading too, their survival hinging on what happened next. "Sheriff's here," Tom Redhawk called, his voice cutting through the wind as headlights pierced the gloom. 2 trucks roared up the rise, their engines growling. Sheriff Callie Wade leapt out, her lean frame silhouetted against the storm's glow, followed by 2 deputies carrying rifles and a flare gun. Behind them, a wildlife vet team was still minutes away, their ETA stretched by the rugged terrain. Callie's eyes widened as she took in the scene, her hand resting on her holster. "Dr. Blackfeather, you weren't kidding. What the hell's going on?" "No time to explain fully," Lena said, rising but keeping her movements slow to avoid spooking the buffalo. "He's protecting the alligator and a jackal pup. The adult jackals are the threat right now. We need to scare them off and get to the pit." Callie nodded, her jaw tight. "All right. Deputies, set up a perimeter. Fire a flare if those jackals get too close." She turned to Lena, her voice low. "You sure that buffalo's not gonna charge? He looks like he could take us all down." Lena's gaze flicked to the bull, his eyes still fixed on her. "He's not the danger. He's asking for help." She pointed to the pit. "The pup's weak, and the alligator's not much better. We need to move fast." The sheriff signaled her deputies, who fanned out, their rifles ready but lowered. Lena took a deep breath, her mind racing through her years of training. Buffalo were unpredictable, especially when wounded, but this one's behavior was deliberate, almost communicative. She'd seen animals act on instinct, defending their young, fighting off threats, but this was different. The buffalo was choosing to protect creatures that weren't his kin, defying nature's rules. Her grandfather's words echoed again, "The buffalo knows the heart of the land." She felt that truth now, in the bull's unwavering stance, in the way his massive head dipped toward the pit as if urging her to act. "Tom, grab the rope from your pack," Lena said, her voice calm but firm. "We're going to secure the area around the pit. I need to get closer to check the pup and alligator." She glanced at the buffalo, her hand outstretched. "Easy, big fella. We're here for you." The bull snorted softly, his breath a warm cloud in the cooling air. He shifted his weight, his wounded leg buckling slightly, but he didn't move from his post. Lena's heart ached at the sight. His strength was fading, yet he stood like a sentinel, his massive shoulders a shield against the jackal's hunger. She edged closer, her boots sinking into the churned dirt, the scent of blood and sage thick in her nose. The storm's first raindrops pattered against her jacket, cold and sharp, as thunder rumbled closer. One of the jackals lunged again, its teeth snapping inches from the pit. The buffalo bellowed, a deep, earth-shaking sound that made Lena's chest vibrate. He swung his head, his horns slicing the air, and the jackal yelped, scrambling back. But the effort cost him. Blood oozed faster from his flank, and his breathing grew more labored. Lena's stomach twisted. They were running out of time. "Tom now," she called. Tom tossed her the rope, and she looped it around a nearby boulder, creating a makeshift barrier to keep the jackals at bay. Callie fired a flare into the sky, its red glow bursting above the prairie, sending the jackals skittering back with startled yips. The buffalo flinched at the light but didn't move, his eyes flicking between Lena and the pit. Lena knelt at the pit's edge, her flashlight beam steady despite her racing pulse. The alligator's eyes were half open, its jaws slack, its body trembling from exhaustion or pain. The jackal pup, no larger than a loaf of bread, whimpered again, its tiny paws scrabbling weakly against the dirt. Lena's throat tightened. The pup was starving, its ribs stark beneath its matted fur, and the alligator's cuts suggested it had fought off the jackals before the buffalo intervened. But why? Why would a buffalo risk everything for these creatures? She reached out, her gloved hand hovering near the buffalo's massive shoulder. "I need to get in there," she said softly, her voice a blend of Shoshone cadence and quiet resolve. "Let me help them." The buffalo's ears twitched, his head lowering slightly, and for a moment, she swore he understood. He took a single, deliberate step to the side, giving her just enough space to slide into the pit without threatening him. Lena's boots hit the dirt, her heart pounding as she crouched beside the alligator. Its tail twitched weakly, but it didn't snap at her, a sign of its weakened state. The pup whimpered louder, its eyes wide and pleading. Lena's fingers brushed the orange fabric she'd seen earlier, pulling it free. It was a torn piece of a hunter's vest, stained with blood and dirt, with a faint logo stitched into it, a stylized W she didn't recognize. Her mind raced. Smugglers? Poachers? The pit's unnatural shape and the tire tracks nearby pointed to human interference, but the buffalo's presence was the real mystery. "Lena, you okay down there?" Callie called, her voice tense as she kept an eye on the jackals. "Yeah," Lena replied, her hands gentle as she checked the pup. Its pulse was weak but steady. "The pup's alive, but it's starving. Alligators hurt bad, cuts, maybe dehydration." She glanced up at the buffalo, his silhouette towering above her. "He's been keeping them alive, Callie. I don't know how, but he has." The buffalo let out a low, almost mournful sound, his head dipping toward the pup. Lena's breath caught as he nudged the air above it, his massive muzzle gentle despite his pain. It was a gesture of care, of protection, that sent a shiver through her. She'd studied buffalo behavior for years, herd dynamics, mating rituals, but this was something new. This was trust, intelligence, compassion in a form she'd never witnessed. "Vet team's here," Tom shouted as another set of headlights crested the rise. Dr. Sarah Gwynn, a wildlife veterinarian with a reputation for handling tough cases, leapt from the truck, her med kit slung over her shoulder. She froze as she took in the scene, her eyes wide. "Lena, you're telling me this buffalo's guarding an alligator and a jackal pup? That's impossible." "Not impossible," Lena said, climbing out of the pit with the pup cradled in her arms. "He's doing it. Look at him." She gestured to the buffalo, who watched her every move, his breathing heavy but his stance unbroken. Sarah approached cautiously, her gaze darting between the bull and the pit. "We need to sedate him to treat those wounds," Sarah said, prepping a tranquilizer dart. "But if he's as protective as you say." "No," Lena cut in, her voice firm. "No tranks yet. He's letting us work. Let's stabilize the alligator and pup first, then we'll figure out how to help him." Sarah hesitated, then nodded, her hands moving quickly to assess the alligator. The buffalo watched, his eyes softening as Lena gently placed the pup on a blanket Tom had spread out. The storm broke then, rain pelting the ground, turning the dirt to mud. The jackals scattered, driven off by the flares and the deputies' shouts, but Lena knew they'd be back. The buffalo bellowed again, softer this time, as if relieved. As Sarah worked on the alligator, injecting fluids and bandaging its cuts, Lena knelt beside the buffalo, her hand inches from his bloodied flank. "You did good," she whispered, her voice catching. "We've got them now." The bull's eyes met hers, and for a moment, amidst the rain and thunder, she felt a bond forge, human and buffalo, united by a shared purpose. The pup was safe, the alligator stabilized, but the buffalo's wounds were critical, and the orange fabric in Lena's pocket burned with questions. Who had left these animals here? And what had driven this buffalo to stand against nature itself to save them? Rain pelted the Wyoming prairie, turning the Bighorn Basin's dry earth into a slick, muddy expanse. The storm's roar mingled with the distant rumble of thunder, but the tension at the canyon's edge had eased, replaced by a fragile hope. The massive buffalo bull stood like a weathered monument, his blood-streaked coat glistening under the rain, his dark eyes tracking Lena Blackfeather as she worked with the wildlife vet team. The jackal pup, now wrapped in a thermal blanket, whimpered softly in Tom Redhawk's arms, its tiny body warmed by a portable heater. The alligator, stabilized with fluids and bandages, lay in a makeshift enclosure rigged from tarps and ropes, its slow breaths a sign of life. The jackals had scattered into the night, driven off by the sheriff's flares, but Lena knew the buffalo's wounds, deep gashes across his flank, a trembling foreleg, demanded urgent care. The orange fabric clutched in her pocket, torn and bloodied, whispered of a human hand behind this strange scene. Dr. Sarah Nguyen, the veterinarian, knelt beside the buffalo, her hands steady as she prepared a sedative. "Lena, we can't wait much longer," she said, her voice cutting through the rain's patter. "His wounds are infected. If we don't treat him now, he won't make it through the night." Lena nodded, her throat tight as she met the buffalo's gaze. His eyes, deep and knowing, held no fear, only a quiet trust that made her chest ache. "Do it," she said softly. "But go slow. He's been through enough." Sarah darted the buffalo with a low-dose tranquilizer, just enough to dull his pain without knocking him out. The bull snorted, his massive head dipping, but he didn't resist. His hooves shifted in the mud, his 2,000-pound frame swaying slightly as the drug took effect. Lena stayed close, her hand hovering near his shoulder, murmuring the Shoshone lullaby her grandfather had taught her. The buffalo's ears twitched, his breathing slowing, and for a moment, she swore he leaned into her voice, his chestnut-brown coat warm under the rain's chill. Sheriff Callie Wade approached, her hat dripping as she scanned the scene. "We've got a transport truck coming for the alligator and pup," she said. "There's a wildlife rehab center in Cody that can take them. But this buffalo, he's too big to move without a bigger rig." She glanced at the pit, its edges softened by the rain. "And that fabric you found, what's your take?" Lena pulled the torn orange vest from her pocket, its W logo barely visible in the flashlight's beam. "It's not local," she said. "Could be from a smuggler's outfit. The pit's man-made, and those tire tracks lead toward the canyon. Someone dumped these animals here, and I'm betting the buffalo got caught in the middle." Callie's jaw tightened. "Exotic animal trade's been a problem out here. We busted a ring last year. Rare reptiles, big cats. But jackals? That's new." She gestured to her deputies, who were scouring the area for more evidence. "We'll run the logo through our database, see if it matches anything." As the vet team cleaned and stitched the buffalo's wounds, Lena watched his transformation. The tranquilizer had eased his pain, and his breathing grew steadier, his coat regaining a faint luster despite the mud. Sarah applied antiseptic, her hands quick but gentle. "He's a fighter," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "These gashes are deep, probably from the jackals or a blade, but he's still standing. I've never seen anything like it." Lena's mind flashed to her grandfather's stories of the buffalo as the heart of the plains, a creature of resilience and sacrifice. She knelt beside him, her hand brushing his woolly flank, feeling the warmth of his life beneath her fingers. "You're more than a fighter," she whispered. "You're a guardian." The buffalo's recovery was slow but steady. By the time the transport truck arrived, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the team had rigged a temporary enclosure for the buffalo near the pit, using portable fencing from the sheriff's supplies. The alligator was loaded onto a stretcher, its cuts bandaged, its eyes brighter as it responded to treatment. The jackal pup, now fed a nutrient paste, slept soundly in Tom's arms, its whimpers replaced by soft, steady breaths. Lena's heart lifted at the sight, but the mystery of the orange fabric gnawed at her. She handed it to Callie, who bagged it as evidence. "I'm heading to the canyon's edge," Lena said, grabbing her flashlight. "Those tire tracks might tell us more." Callie nodded, her expression grim. "Take Tom. I don't want you out there alone." Lena and Tom followed the tracks, their boots sinking into the mud as they traced the faint ruts toward a rocky outcrop. The beam of Lena's flashlight caught a glint of metal, a discarded knife, its blade stained with blood. Nearby, a crumpled piece of paper lay half buried in the dirt. Lena retrieved it, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. It was a shipping manifest, partially torn, listing exotic specimens with cryptic codes: gator, J1-3, pup. At the bottom, a scrawled note read, "Dispose at Bighorn. No witnesses." Lena's stomach churned. "Smugglers," she said, her voice low. They were dumping these animals. Probably thought they were too weak to sell. But the buffalo, she trailed off, her mind racing. Had he witnessed the drop-off? Fought the smugglers to protect the creatures left to die? Tom's eyes widened as he read the note over her shoulder. No witnesses. That's why the buffaloes hurt. He must have charged them. Lena nodded, her resolve hardening. And he stayed to protect the others. Even when it cost him. Back at the enclosure, the buffalo was resting, his massive head lowered as Sarah monitored his vitals. The media had caught wind of the story. Local reporters were already arriving, their camera flashes cutting through the drizzle. A young journalist, Mia Torres, approached Lena, her notebook in hand. "Dr. Blackfeather, is it true? A buffalo protecting an alligator and a jackal pup? People need to hear this." Lena hesitated, her eyes on the buffalo. His presence had already drawn attention, his story rippling beyond the prairie. "It's true," she said. "He's not just protecting them. He's showing us something, about compassion, about strength." She paused, her voice softening. "He needs a name. I'm calling him Ironheart." Mia scribbled the name, her eyes bright. Ironheart. That's perfect. This could change how people see buffalo, maybe even spark a conservation push. Lena's heart stirred at the thought. Her work had always been about protecting the herds, but Ironheart's actions were something more, a testament to intelligence and empathy that could shift perceptions. She glanced at Callie, who was speaking with a wildlife official on her radio. "We're getting calls from the state," Callie said, joining them. "They're talking about a genetic study. Ironheart might be from a rare lineage. His size, his behavior, it's not typical." Lena's mind raced. A rare lineage could mean protection for his herd, maybe even a new sanctuary. But the manifest and knife pointed to a darker truth. The smugglers were still out there, and Ironheart's wounds were a reminder of their cruelty. She knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly on his flank. "You're safe now," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But we're not done." The buffalo, Ironheart, let out a low, rumbling sound, his eyes meeting hers. The bond between them felt stronger now, forged in the mud and rain, in the shared fight to save the helpless. As the reporters snapped photos and the vet team prepared to move Ironheart to a rehab center, Lena felt a new challenge rising. The manifest held names, codes, a trail to follow. The smugglers had left Ironheart to die, but he'd defied them, and now, so would she. The Wyoming dawn broke over the Bighorn Basin, painting the prairie in hues of gold and rose, the storm's remnants scattered as wisps of cloud on the horizon. Lena Blackfeather stood at the edge of a temporary wildlife enclosure, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, her eyes fixed on Ironheart, the massive buffalo bull whose courage had reshaped her world. His chestnut-brown coat, once matted with blood and dust, gleamed with new luster under the morning light, his stitched wounds healing steadily under the care of Dr. Saren Wen's veterinary team. The gashes on his flank were closing, his trembling foreleg now bore his 2,000-pound frame with growing strength, and his deep, resonant breaths carried a vitality that made Lena's heart swell. Nearby, in a separate pen at the Cody Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, the alligator rested, its cuts healing, while the jackal pup, now named Sage for its gray-green eyes, scampered playfully, its strength restored by proper care. Lena's hand rested on the enclosure's fence, her fingers tracing the rough wood as she watched Ironheart graze, his massive head dipping to tear at the grass. The bond between them had deepened over the past week, forged in the rain-soaked chaos of that night at the canyon's edge. She'd spent hours by his side, speaking softly, her Shoshone lullaby a constant thread through his recovery. Ironheart's eyes, dark and knowing, would meet hers, and she'd feel a spark of connection, a silent acknowledgement of their shared fight to save the alligator and Sage. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind, "The buffalo carries the heart of the land, and its heart teaches us our own." Ironheart had taught her more than resilience. He'd shown her a compassion that transcended species, a lesson she was determined to carry forward. The rehab center buzzed with activity. Reporters had flocked to Cody, their stories about Ironheart's extraordinary act spreading across national news and social media. The hashtag Ironheart the Guardian trended on X, with posts marveling at the buffalo's intelligence and calls for stronger wildlife protections. Lena had given interviews reluctantly, her focus on Ironheart's recovery, but the attention had drawn researchers from the University of Wyoming, who confirmed Ironheart's rare genetic lineage, a direct descendant of the Yellowstone herd, a keystone population critical to the prairie ecosystem. Their findings had sparked talks of a new conservation initiative, one Lena was now advocating for with a fire she hadn't felt in years. Dr. Blackfeather. Tom Redhawk's voice broke her reverie as he jogged up, his face lit with excitement. The state's on board. They're proposing a sanctuary for Ironheart's herd, maybe even a research center to study buffalo behavior. Your testimony yesterday sealed it. Lena's lips curved into a rare smile. She'd spent hours at a state wildlife board meeting, presenting Ironheart's story alongside Sarah's veterinary reports and the researcher's genetic data. The torn orange vest and the smuggler's manifest, now in Sheriff Callie Wade's hands, had bolstered her case, pointing to the broader issue of exotic animal trafficking. It's a start, she said, her voice steady but warm. Ironheart's story is bigger than him. It's about the land, the herds, the balance we've nearly lost. Tom nodded, glancing at Ironheart. He's changing things, isn't he? People are listening because of him. Lena's gaze returned to the buffalo. He lifted his head, his curved horns catching the sunlight, and let out a low bellow that echoed across the enclosure. It was a sound of strength, of life reclaimed, and it sent a shiver through her. He's showing us what's possible, she said softly. What we can be. The sanctuary proposal wasn't without challenges. Bureaucrats questioned the cost, and local ranchers worried about land use conflicts. Lena had faced skeptical officials before, but Ironheart's story gave her leverage. She'd met with tribal elders from the Shoshone and Arapaho nations, whose support added cultural weight to the initiative. They saw Ironheart as a symbol of renewal, a bridge between their traditions and modern conservation. Lena felt the weight of their trust, her heritage intertwining with her scientific expertise in a way that felt profoundly right. As she walked toward Ironheart's enclosure, Sarah joined her, her med kit slung over her shoulder. He's ready to move soon, Sarah said, her eyes bright. His wounds are healing faster than I expected. We can relocate him to a protected range, maybe the new sanctuary if it gets approved. Lena nodded, her hand brushing Ironheart's flank as he approached the fence. His warmth radiated through her palm, and he nudged her gently, his muzzle soft against her arm. The gesture was intimate, a sign of trust that made her breath catch. You're almost home, big guy, she murmured. But we've got work to do first. The smuggler's manifest had yielded results. Callie's investigation traced the logo on the orange vest to Wildwood Exports, a shady operation linked to exotic animal trafficking. The manifest's codes matched animals seized in a raid 2 years prior, suggesting the alligator and jackals were part of a failed smuggling run. The knife's blood matched Ironheart's, confirming he'd fought the smugglers, likely charging their vehicle to protect the abandoned creatures. Lena's anger flared at the thought, but it fueled her resolve. She'd shared the findings with Mia Torres, the journalist, who was drafting an exposé to pressure law enforcement into broader action. That afternoon, Lena joined a community meeting at the rehab center, where locals, tribal representatives, and conservationists gathered to discuss the sanctuary. Ironheart's enclosure was visible through a window, his presence a silent catalyst. Lena spoke passionately, her voice carrying the weight of her grandfather's stories and her own expertise. Ironheart didn't just save an alligator and a pup, she said, her eyes sweeping the room. He showed us what compassion looks like. We can honor that by protecting his kind, by restoring the prairie's heart. The crowd erupted in applause, and an elder named Joseph Elkhorn stood, his voice resonant. The buffalo is our brother. Ironheart reminds us to listen to the land, to act with courage. His words sealed a partnership, with the tribes pledging support for the sanctuary. As the meeting ended, Lena returned to Ironheart, the sun dipping low, casting his silhouette against the prairie. She leaned against the fence, her hand resting on his flank as he grazed nearby. "You changed me," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Before Ironheart, her work had been driven by duty, a way to honor her heritage. Now, it was personal, a mission to protect the spark of compassion she'd seen in his eyes. She'd once doubted her place in a world that seemed to value progress over nature, but Ironheart had given her purpose, a reason to fight. The sanctuary was approved that evening, a 10,000-acre preserve where Ironheart's herd could roam, protected and studied. Lena's heart lifted as she imagined him galloping across the open prairie, his bellows echoing through the grass. But the smugglers remained a shadow, their network still active. Callie had promised to follow the trail, and Lena vowed to help, ensuring no other creature faced Ironheart's ordeal. As the sun set, Ironheart lifted his head, his eyes meeting Lena's in a moment of quiet understanding. The prairie stretched before them, vast and alive, and Lena felt a surge of hope. Ironheart's story wasn't just a rescue, it was a transformation. For him, for her, and for the world watching. The Wyoming prairie stretched boundless under a late summer sky, its amber grasses swaying in a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage and earth. In the heart of the newly established Ironheart Sanctuary, a 10,000-acre expanse of rolling hills and open plains, Lena Blackfeather stood on a low rise, her dark braid catching the golden light of dusk. Below her, Ironheart, the massive buffalo bull, grazed peacefully, his chestnut-brown coat gleaming with health, his once wounded flank now a faint scar beneath his thick woolly fur. His curved horns glinted as he lifted his head, letting out a deep, resonant bellow that echoed across the preserve, a sound that seemed to carry the heartbeat of the land itself. Lena's chest swelled with pride and peace, a quiet moment shared with the creature who had changed her life and countless others. It had been 6 months since that rain-soaked night at the canyon's edge, when Ironheart stood over an alligator and a jackal pup, defying nature's rules to protect the helpless. The sanctuary, named in his honor, was now a thriving haven for his herd, a place where buffalo roamed freely under the watchful eyes of researchers, tribal stewards, and conservationists. The alligator, fully recovered, had been relocated to a wildlife preserve in Louisiana, its unlikely survival a testament to Ironheart's courage. Sage, the jackal pup, now a lanky juvenile, thrived in a specialized facility in Colorado, its playful spirit a reminder of the bond forged in that muddy pit. Lena visited them when she could, but it was Ironheart who held her heart, his presence a constant in her daily work at the sanctuary. The buffalo's story had rippled far beyond Wyoming. Ironheart's act of compassion, guarding creatures so foreign to his world, had captured global attention, sparking a movement. The hashtag Ironheart the Guardian still trended on X, with millions sharing stories of animal empathy and calls for conservation. The University of Wyoming's research team, inspired by Ironheart's rare genetic lineage, had launched a study on buffalo cognition, their findings suggesting a depth of emotional intelligence that reshaped scientific understanding. Lena had co-authored their first paper, her field notes from that night woven into data that challenged old assumptions about animal behavior. The sanctuary itself was a triumph, funded by a coalition of tribal councils, state grants, and public donations, its gates marked by a bronze plaque bearing Ironheart's name and a simple inscription, Guardian of the Plains, Teacher of Compassion. Lena's advocacy hadn't stopped there. The Smuggler's Manifest and Orange Vest had led Sheriff Callie Wade to dismantle a branch of Wildwood Exports, the trafficking ring responsible for abandoning the alligator and jackals. Arrests followed, and the case, amplified by Mia Torres's exposé, had spurred federal legislation to tighten exotic animal trade regulations. Lena had testified in Cheyenne, her voice steady as she recounted Ironheart's wounds, his defiance, his choice to protect rather than flee. The law, dubbed the Ironheart Act, was now under review, a beacon of hope for creatures caught in human greed. As Lena watched Ironheart now, his massive frame moving with the grace of a creature reborn, she reflected on her own transformation. Before that night, her work as a wildlife biologist had been a duty, a way to honor her Shoshone heritage and her grandfather's teachings. But Ironheart had awakened something deeper, a belief in the power of connection, in the possibility of change even in a world scarred by loss. She'd once felt adrift, caught between her scientific training and the spiritual pull of her roots. Now, she stood firmly in both worlds, her purpose clear, to protect the buffalo, the land, and the lessons they carried. She walked down the rise, her boots soft on the grass, and approached the fence where Ironheart grazed. He lifted his head, his dark eyes meeting hers, and ambled toward her, his 2,000-pound frame a gentle giant in her presence. Lena reached out, her hand resting on his warm flank, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath. "You did this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed us what matters." Ironheart nudged her arm, his muzzle soft, and let out a low, rumbling sound, as if answering her. The moment felt sacred, a quiet communion under the vast prairie sky. Joseph Elkhorn, the Shoshone elder, joined her, his weathered face creased with a smile. "He's our brother," he said, his voice resonant. "And you, Lena, have carried his story well." He gestured to the sanctuary, where other buffalo grazed, their silhouettes dark against the sunset. "This place is a promise, to the land, to our people, to him." Lena nodded, her heart full. The sanctuary wasn't just a refuge, it was a bridge between past and future, a place where children from the reservation learned their ancestors' stories alongside scientists studying the buffalo's role as a keystone species. School groups visited weekly, their laughter mingling with the bellows of the herd, and Lena often spoke to them, sharing Ironheart's tale and urging them to see the world through eyes of compassion. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Ironheart's silhouette in a halo of fire, Lena felt a call to action stirring within her. She turned her gaze to the stars emerging above, her thoughts reaching beyond the prairie to you, the reader. Ironheart's story is more than a tale of one buffalo's courage. It's a reminder that compassion knows no boundaries, that a single act of kindness can ripple through the world. Have you ever witnessed an animal's intelligence, its unexpected grace, and felt your perspective shift? Have you seen the spark of connection that defies species, that speaks to the heart of what it means to be alive? You can carry Ironheart's legacy forward. Support conservation efforts in your community, whether it's protecting local wildlife, advocating for stronger laws, or simply sharing this story. Visit a preserve, learn about the creatures that shape our world, and ask yourself, what can I do to honor the land and its guardians? Ironheart stood for those who couldn't, and now, it's our turn to stand for him. Lena's hand lingered on Ironheart's flank, the prairie's silence wrapping them in a moment of peace. His bellow echoed once more, a deep, resonant call that seemed to speak for the land itself. As she walked back to the sanctuary's lodge, the stars bright above, Lena knew this was no ending, only a beginning. Ironheart's heart beat on, in the prairie, in her, and in every soul his story touched.